The general procedure for test of hypothesis. The general procedure for test of hypothesis contains two approaches, using the fixed probability of type 1 error or significant testing of the p-value. Let us start with using the fixed probability of type 1 error. This approach consists of 7 steps. The first step is state the null and alternative hypothesis. The null hypothesis, denoted as HO, is the statement na no effect and walang pagbabago sa problem. While ang alternative hypothesis, denoted as HA, siya naman yung statement na gusto natin i-test or gusto natin i-prove sa ating problem. The next step is determine the level of significance. The level of significance natin, usually, ang ginagamit natin dito ay 0.05 or kung ano man ang given of level of significance ng ating problem. To much visualize kung saan mapupunta ang direction, madidetermine natin siya sa claim ng ating problem. If ang need natin i-prove ay less than sa null hypothesis, ang direction niya ay to the left or left-tailed. Pag naman ang need natin i-prove ay greater than or more than the null hypothesis, ang direction niya ay to the right or right-tailed. And lastly, if ang need natin i-prove ay hindi siya nag-equal sa null hypothesis, ang test natin ay magiging two-tailed. Next step is determine the appropriate statistical test. The statistical test can either be a C-test or a T-test, depending sa bilang ng ating sample size. If ang sample size is greater than or equal to 30, C-test ang gagamitin natin. And kapag naman ang sample size is less than 30, T-test ang gagamitin natin. Next step is write the decision rule on how to accept or reject the null hypothesis. Maggagawa tayo ng decision rule on how to accept or reject the null hypothesis. Magagawa tayo ng decision if ang ating computed value ay nag-fall sa critical region. Huwari, ang ating critical value or critical region ay nandito. If ang ating computed value ay bumaksak dito, ibig sabihin, meron tayong evidence na tama ang claim ng ating problem. Ang next step naman natin, doon na tayo magko-compute, which is compute the test statistic and compare the tested value with the critical value. After natin ma-determine ang statistical test na gagamitin natin, pwede natin i-compute ang T or C value. May dalawa tayong formula. Ang T-test at saka C-test. For T-test, siya ay TC is equals to computed mean minus hypothesis mean all over sample standard deviation over square root of sample size. While for C-test is CC equals computed mean minus hypothesis mean all over population standard deviation over square root of sample size. After natin makuha ang computed value, pwede natin siya pag-compare sa ating critical value. Our step 6 is state the decision based on the result when compared to the critical value. After natin ma-compute at ma-compare, babalik ulit tayo sa bell curve at titingnan natin kung saan region bumagsak ang ating computed value. And for our last step, draw a scientific or engineering conclusion for the given problem. Gagawa tayo ng short conclusion na nakipakita na may evidence o wala para i-prove ang claim ng ating statement. To much understand, we will answer some sample problems. A convenience store owner claims that its average daily sales are 15,000 pesos. A competitor believes that the true average is less than 15,000 pesos due to less customer visits. To verify this, a random sample of 25 days is taken, showing an average daily of 14,200 pesos with a standard deviation of 1,500 pesos. At a 0.05 level of significance, is there enough evidence to conclude that the average daily sales is less than 15,000 pesos? So, our first step is state the null and alternative hypothesis, where our null is equals to 15,000 pesos, while our alternative hypothesis, wherein our problem claims that the average daily sales is less than 15,000 pesos. Our next step is determine the significance level and direction of the test, where our level of significance is 0.05 and our direction of the test is to the left because the claim is less than the null hypothesis. Our next step is determine the appropriate statistical test. We will use t-test because the sample size is less than 30. Our sample size is 25 and our degree of freedom is 24 because degree of freedom is sample size minus 1. And the formula we will use is the t-test, where TC is equals to computed mean minus hypothesis mean all over sample standard deviation over square root of sample size. For our step 4, write the decision on how to accept or reject the null hypothesis. To get the critical value of our t, we will use the t-table. Our degree of freedom is 24, while our level of significance is 0.05. So, hanapin lang natin ang ating critical value. And ito nakuha natin, 1.711. Total, ang ating test is to the left, kaya siya naging negative. Next step naman natin is i-compute natin with the use of formula and the given, where our computed mean is equals to 14,200 pesos minus to our hypothesis mean 15,000 pesos all over 1,500 pesos, which is our sample standard deviation, all over our sample size, which is 25, which is equals to 2.667. For the next step, we can compare it again. We can compare the computed value with the critical value. To much better understand using the fixed probability of type 1 error approach, here's another problem. A professor claims that a new teaching method improves student performance. In the pilot study of 25 students, the average exam score is 82, compared to the traditional method's average score of 78. With a sample standard deviation of 6. At a 0.01 significance level, can we conclude that the new method leads to a higher average score? So, our first step is state the null and alternative hypothesis, where our null hypothesis is equal to 78, while our alternative hypothesis is greater than 78. Next step is determine the level of significance and the direction of test. We can see that the level of significance is 0.01. So, is equals to 0.01. While the direction of our test is to the right. Because we are testing something that is greater than the null hypothesis. Step 3, to determine the appropriate statistical test. T-test will be used because the sample size is less than 30. Our sample size is equals to 25, while again, our degree of freedom is 24 because sample size minus 1. Next step is how we decide on how to accept or reject the null hypothesis. So, for our t-table, Our critical value, our T critical value is equals to we can see that our degree of freedom is 24, while our level of significance is 0.01. So, critical value is 2.492. Now it's positive because the test is to the right, or it is right-tailed. And in the bell curve, it is somewhere over here. Next step is, let us compute the use of formula of t-test, where our computed mean is equals to 82, while our hypothesis mean is equals to 78, our sample standard deviation is equals to 6, and the square root of 25, which is our sample size. This will be equal to 3.33 On step 6, we can now compare the t critical value with the computed value. We say that our t critical value is over here, and our computed value is over here. Which concludes that in step 7, our conclusion is there is enough evidence that the new teaching method increases the average exam scores we can see the computed value falls in the rejection region. So, we can reject the null hypothesis. Which brings us to our last step, which is draw a scientific or engineering conclusion for the given problem. Where, in this problem, there is enough evidence that the true daily sales is less than 15,000 pesos. Above 78. To much better understand this approach, here's another problem. An engineer claims that a new metal alloy has a tensile strength greater than 500 megapascal. A sample of 40 specimens is tested, giving a mean tensile strength of 508 megapascal and a population standard deviation of 10 megapascal. At a 0.05 significance level, does the data support the engineer's claim? So as usual, ang unang step natin ay state the null and alternative hypothesis. Ang null natin is equals to 500, while ang alternative natin is greater than 500. Next step, determine the level of significance at saka yung direction of the test. Ang level of significance natin ay 0.05 and ang direction ng ating test is to the right. Kasi, ang pinoprove natin or ang need natin i-claim ay greater than the null hypothesis. Step 3 ay kung ano appropriate test ang gagamitin natin, which is ang C-test because ang sample size natin is greater than 30. Formula natin para sa C-test ay CZ is equals to computed mean minus hypothesis mean all over population standard deviation divided by square root of sample size. And for our step 4, is dito tayo maggagawa ng decision kung paano natin i-reject or i-accept ang computed value with the help of the critical value from the t-table. Let us draw first the bell curve, and the critical value is equals to, let us check from our table where our level of significance is equals to 0.05 and C test nga ang gagamitin natin. So, from C, tas ang ating level of significance ay 0.05. So, ang ating critical C value is 1.645. So, sabihin natin, siya ay nandito. And for our step 5, dito na natin siya pwede i-compute. Where 508 as our computed mean minus 500 as our hypothesis mean all over 10 as our population standard deviation over the square root of 40 as our sample size, which is equal to 5.0596. And after computing, we can go to our step 6 to compare the computed value and our critical value. Let us draw again our bell curve. And our computed value falls within the critical value. Which means in our step 7, the conclusion of our problem is that there is strong evidence that the new alloy has exceeded the previous tensile strength. And that's all for the 7 steps of using the fixed probability of type 1 error approach in hypothesis testing. Thank you.